true value in relationships. Big headline this week: $1 trillion of debt in Australia, $40 trillion of debt in America. Okay, let's unpack that. Often a barrier to when I'm talking to others about money, and relatively educated, well understood, rational human beings on the other side of the conversation, they'll say something like, well, I put my money in the bank. 1, it's not money. 2, it's not yours. And 3, it's not even there. That's the barrier I have. Because how do I unpack all of that so that we can then go from there to the next step? So the gap between that conversation is breaking all those elements down slowly, articulately, and allowing those ideas to be understood and being able to ask clarifying questions back and forth. Most people don't have 5 hours to talk about that, to fully unpack it, which is reasonable and understandable. Let's do it for a moment. Why is it not money? Well, money is 3 things: a store of value, a unit of account, and a medium of exchange. And we use it to make our lives easier. If you're growing beetroot and I grow lettuce and I want beetroot, but you don't want lettuce, how do we make that exchange? Well, money, this third idea, comes into that scenario. And we can store our time and energy in that thing, and that can be the value exchange. Most people get that idea. That thing is a store of value. It has to retain the value over time. It's not a money because it has utility. Whatever you're using to be that barter of exchange, if it has utility, it can't be a money because it's always going to be used for other things. So you almost want it to be completely impartial and non-usable for anything else. If I've got a $10 note, the only thing I can use that for is to exchange it. If it was also firewood, I could burn it when I'm cold. If it was also gold, I might wear it on my wrist as a show of wealth. If it was also silver, I might use it in components in my iPhone. And that affects where it goes. So you want it to actually only have one use: to be held and exchanged and store value. It's also helpful if it's a unit of account. I can look at it and go, I've got that many. Because if I store it in a barn and it's hay bales, I open the barn door, how much have I got? I've no idea. So I can't break that down and go, well, that thing over there should cost me 1 hay bale, because I don't even know how many hay bales I've got. So how do I know the value of something else if I don't know what I'm using as the money and what I've got relative to other things? So let's bring it back now away from the abstract. Historically, gold was money, silver was money. Why? Because it was really hard to manipulate the supply. It was a hard thing that took a lot of time, energy, effort to get it, to mine it. You couldn't just ship some over in an Uber to your island and then debase everyone. Problem is that blue $10 note, that pineapple $50 note, why is that money? Why does that hold value? But it does. And it's a psychological idea. And that's not trying to break away from it. I still see it as value. I know it's money. If someone's going to offer me, hey, do you want this $50 note? I'll say yes, because I know I can exchange it for other stuff. Now, I might not value it as much as the next person, which is why I don't put the money in the bank account. But I still value it for what it is. The problem is much more pernicious. The issue is it's slower in what it's doing to you and what it does to your brain. So let's break away from that idea a little bit. So that money, back to the analogy, that money that we're using is supposed to store time, energy, effort in it, from the beetroot, from the lettuce. It's an economic amalgamation of everything that's gone on everywhere, the value of the whole world stored in that money. in the total supply of the money. We can store our time and energy in that. It won't go anywhere. It's good. It's helpful. Problem is that when you've got a government, they come in and they say, well, you don't need that money as much as this person. I'm going to tax this other business more than I tax this business. I'm going to tax this person more than I tax this person. Different industries, different people, different assets, completely unique and ever-changing and moving. So be it. That's not the point that's being argued. The government believe that they can make better choices than a free economic market can. So they say, we need to actually put some of the money into disability and into pensions, into hospitals, into schools, into defense. Don't forget about roads. And so their version of money is that they don't have enough. They can't. We want to spend more than what we actually have. So what are we going to do? How do we fix that? Well, we'll borrow some and we'll pay it back later, just like you would if you want to buy a car and you've got no money. You take a loan, you pay it back later. The problem is they don't really have anyone standing over their shoulder saying, hang on a minute, you owe me that money. You better give it back to me because you borrowed it from me. If you don't, I'm going to break your thumbs. They don't have the debt collector that brings everything back to a tangible real life experience. Oh crap, I better pay that bill. That's how we feel. I better pay the bill because I know what happened if I don't. They'll shut my power off. They'll repossess my car. They'll just tack it onto my rates. They will get it back somehow. So they continue to borrow it. They continue to use it. They continue to spend it now because we need it. They're desperate now. We're desperate now. We spend it now. We'll pay it back later. Real quick detour to politics. Politicians, their priority is to remain elected, to keep their constituents happy, to keep the masses happy, keep their promises. And so they say, if you vote for us, we'll do this. If you vote for us, we'll get rid of immigration. We'll fund the NDIS. We'll fix the roads. We'll make sure hospitals are ready for everybody. We'll look into the debt and we'll look into the CMFEU. We'll fix it. We promise, guys, we'll fix that stuff. All that stuff costs money to do. And then they get elected and 3 years pass. And they do some of the things they said they were going to do. Maybe all of them. Let's give them faith. And then the next election rolls around. And hang on a minute, the people don't like us. We just gave them all that stuff and they still don't like us. So then they have to promise more things and different things. And the debt keeps growing because that's the incentive. The incentive is to spend money now, keep people happy, pay it back later. The opposition party says the same stuff. It's bipartisan. Both parties want to incentivize the voter by giving them stuff. That money in the bank, first point, it's not money. Money has to be a store of value. We've realized, yep, it's a unit of account. Great. I can see the numbers in my bank account. I know how much I've got in my wallet. We can also exchange it between one another and I can buy things with it. It is absolutely a medium of exchange. But the store of value part, that's the problem. Because if they're spending $1 trillion of state debt and $1 trillion of federal debt in Australia, and remember, $1 trillion is a really abstract idea. It's a really abstract number. $1 trillion is a 1 with 12 zeros after it. $1 trillion is 1 million times 1 million. 1 million seconds, if I'm to relate it to time. 1 million seconds is 11 days. 1 billion seconds is 31 years. And 1 trillion seconds is 31,000 years. That's a better way of visualizing money as time. Because whether it's 1 mil or 50 mil, that's 11 days or 550 days. You can understand that. Okay. But when it gets to these big numbers, it is so abstract and hard to understand. The idea is it's stored time and energy. The size of it is so hard for us to conceptualize and understand that it's so abstract. I know $50, I've got $50, I can understand what that is. As soon as you get beyond the billions, I don't get it and I'll never get it. That money, it's getting inflated away. It's perniciously slowly, without your knowledge, being siphoned from you, being taken from you, because you own less of a share of it than you used to. Let's say you're back on that island and you were using gold as money. Now, there's only so much gold within that island. There's 100 bits of gold, and everyone knows that a house costs 2 bits of gold because there's 20 houses, 2 bits of gold each. All the houses are worth 40 bits of gold. Cool. We can also spend it and buy food and services and all the other things that we need to do with that gold. Great. The problem happens when a ship comes over and they bring another 100 pieces of gold. So the gold within the system has doubled. And the people who know that first, they see it and they go, I'm going to buy that house for two gold coins. I'm going to buy as many houses as I can for 2 gold coins, because now there's 200 pieces of gold in the system. The houses should double in total value. If I buy a house for 2, it's going to be worth 4, so I'll do that. Governments choose to spend money on lots of different programs. Some of them socialistic, some of them have a return, an economic financial return. But they're borrowing and they're using borrowed money to do that, which means if it does not have a return, it's going to cost you to pay back in the future. Not just what you borrow, but the interest on it as well, especially if it doesn't have a financial value return. And yes, there's some things that don't have a financial return, and that's okay. And we can't define the value of a system. We can't define the value of the NDIS or of having schools that are creating great learners, because it gives people opportunity and it rescues people where they need it and helps them in time of need and helps those who are disadvantaged. And that's fantastic that we have an economic system that can provide that. These are the realities when you're using a money. Something has to either pay you back at the end of that. You're borrowing the money. We have to pay it back, or we have to spread the pain to everybody else. And the debt is the spreading of the pain. That's the pernicious inflation. Inflation is the spreading of the pain. But by understanding what money is, how it starts as an idea, then you can see the flow-on effects. These are third, fourth, principal flow-on effects of a decision of government to spend money that it doesn't have. The debt that Australia has as a ratio of how much growth we have and what we sell each year, it's actually not as high as other places around the world. GDP is your gross domestic product. And they use a debt to GDP ratio to measure how much debt a system has with this explanation, the reason they use it. It is useful. Imagine you've got a $10,000 credit card and you've got an income of $100,000. You still owe the debt. You still owe $10,000. But let's say next year you get a pay rise and now you're on $120,000. Well, your debt's still the same. You have to pay interest on it. You haven't paid any of it back. You owe $10,000, and let's say your interest repayments are 10% per year. Now, the next year, you owe $11,000, but you've got an income of $120,000. So the debt is actually less. It's less than how much money you have as a whole. So you're like, great, I'm doing really well. I can easily pay that off. And as that's rolling over and you're earning more and more money, you're okay. And Australia as a country, that's what's been happening. They've been earning more and more money each year. The GDP's been more and more each year. But if the economy stops, if COVID happens, if a war happens, if spending goes up, as in you borrow another $10,000 to spend on some more stuff, or your income comes down, you get demoted or you lose your job, you still have to pay that money back. So when it's rolling, it's fine. But the fear comes into it when the unexpected happens. And every day, something that has never happened before happens. But debt to GDP is useful because what does $1 trillion mean? I mean, what does $1 million of household debt mean? Well, if I'm making $2 million per year, I'm not. If I was, then that $1 million of household debt, that's nothing, that's fine. But if I'm making $50,000 a year, that's trouble. You're trapped. You'll never pay it off. The $1 million of debt is too much unless something changes. America's debt to GDP is really high. They've got $40 trillion of debt. And when there's a specific percentage of debt to GDP, it always results in a debt spiral, meaning you can't get out of it. and I'll explain that. Once you have a debt of 130% debt to GDP, throughout history, that has always resulted in the currency failing. Eventually, that number, paying off the debt, spirals, and you can never catch up because the interest repayments outweigh the growth. So America, they spend more on interest on that debt than they do on defense, and they spend a lot on defense. It's a race that you'll never catch up, right? Like, so imagine you're racing someone that's faster than you, and you're trying to catch them. Over 100 meters, you're 10 meters behind. Over 200 meters, you're 20 meters behind. The longer it goes, you will only ever fall further and further and further behind because the distance is compounding away and they're quicker. They'll always be quicker. You'll never catch them unless something changes. They trip or something changes the momentum. In Australia, money growth, the debt can come from the private sector too. Not in Australia, in the world. But in Australia, we actually have a really large private debt to GDP, which means every family person all added up together. They've got money that they've borrowed to buy what? Houses and businesses and things. The government debt is actually much smaller here than the private debt. In America, it's the opposite. But the private system here has about $4 trillion of debt that we've borrowed from the future, spent it on houses, and because houses cannot possibly give us a return, right? It doesn't provide any productivity. It's a shelter. When a government spends money, they can get greater productivity. They can get greater royalties on the miners. They could sell a bunch of stuff to China. They can earn a hell of a lot more money from different ways, different mechanisms. They could pay the debt off. If they get $1 trillion surplus next year, no worries, problem solved. But you'll never get that from housing because a house doesn't produce anything. It sits there and you live in it. Okay, you could say it produces a yield because people can rent it, but those ideas are poles apart. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't add up relative as an investment. It made sense as a store of value because the money didn't. So on our beetroot lettuce example, I don't like those blue $10 notes and those pineapple $50 notes. I'll take those dollars, I'll put them into a house because that will store the value better than the blue and the yellow stuff does. Yields are so low. It's the same problem. You'll never outpace the runner who's running next to you. And the debt is outpacing the rental income. So it's a bad investment. Now, we're talking about two different systems. And America and Australia, they're based around the same problem. Spending now, paying back later, to the point that the money is so manipulated, so variable, so changing, there's nothing tethering it to reality anymore. And that is where Bitcoin comes in. And that is why Bitcoin is up 25% in 2.5 days. There's a great saying, when something can't go on forever, it won't. Now, that's not saying it'll end today. It might not end tomorrow. At some point, it will end. And this is the thesis around hard money solutions like gold and Bitcoin. And this is why macroeconomic investors worldwide and hedge fund managers and Ray Dalio's got some fantastic series about the changing world order and a series about debt explaining it, the debt cycle. Two fantastic educational topics. And they make you realize history is full of these examples where governments and private sectors got to a debt level that was too hard and it blew up. So the TLDR is debts that the governments are spending, the deficits they're spending means that we are leaving our kids to pay off a greater amount of debt than the debt that was left by our parents. If you think that's okay, if you think that that's the right thing, then you're entitled to that view. I'd suggest it's worth reconsidering because it's a selfish point of view. It's saying that you deserve something that the next generation will have to pay for. And it's going to be a hell of a legacy that we leave to the next generation. The stock market has had the best 6-year run since the 1990s, since the dot-com bubble, since the invention of the internet and commercialization of the internet. So we're talking about the S&P. We're talking about an index of the best 500 stocks in America. And a stock is a real thing. It's a company. It makes money. It invests in things. And it's based on everything that we just talked about with money. So why are stocks good? Why have houses had a great 30-year run? Why Bitcoin had a great 17-year run? It's because it's all measured in this money. If an Uber takes gold, ships it across to this island, and this gold supply goes from 100 to 200, then from 200 to 400, then from 400 to 800, everything is measured in the nominal value. Everything is measured in the total supply of the thing, that gold. If there's 100 pieces of gold in the entire island, then I can spend 2 pieces of gold on each house. If there's 800 pieces of gold in the entire economy, then I can spend 15, 10 pieces of gold on every house because I know there's only 40 houses. I'll be okay. If there's only 100 pieces of gold, will you spend 40 on a house? Probably not, because that's half of the entire island. That's half of its economic value. The abstract version of money needs to be brought to the tangible, real version of the world. Stocks have outperformed the last 6 years and done really well after COVID, after the world stopped. Then we had the Ukraine invasion. Then we had the close of Hormuz, the stop of the flow of oil, along with a multitude of other economic issues. But the stock market still went up. The fear is always there. Horrible spending from the Victorian government, the problems with the federal government. But the stocks just keep going up because they're measured in the total supply of the thing that is measuring them. If you have a job, then you get a mortgage, you buy a house, and you pay for the house. You have one end to life. You have one reality. You work for 30 to 40 years, then you die. You'll never be free. You'll be tethered and trapped to that idea. Earn money, put some aside, and invest it. Whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's stocks, whether it's gold, hard assets. Get yourself some hard assets because this debt problem globally only ends a couple of ways. The tangible real life thing is valuable, not the dollars.